All right, hi. I'm Heather Frase, and I'm going to be talking on two parts of this flowchart that you see. I'm going to be talking about the prompt creation process and also about once we get those outputs from the evaluator, those binary outputs of safe or unsafe, how are those rolled up into a grade and then put into a report? And these are actually work from two different work streams, work stream 2 and work stream 4, which had a large number of people involved. There we go. Okay, here is a high-level overview of the prompt creation process. What we start with was just a request for people to submit proposals for creating prompts for us. And we had a number of proposals. Then various workstream leads ranked the proposals for different characteristics. Those were all rolled up into a high-level ranking, and then we were down-selected to 3 different suppliers for prompts. Those suppliers were then given the hazard categories, which Eleonora talked about, and also a lot of detailed guidance, which is one of the things that Eleonora also touched on. It's more than just a hazard category. It's detailed definitions, understanding of what makes a prompt fit into a certain category. And these are important to make sure we have good coverage of the hazard categories. So those were given to the suppliers. They then produced the prompts. They actually produced them in 2 batches. We examined all the prompts to make sure they had decent prompt quality, and then they were divided up into 3 data sets. There was the data set that's an open practice data set that anyone can now look at, or it's publicly available. There is also a test data set that's used internally by MLCommons for its work on the benchmark. And then there is the hidden data set that is not being viewed by anyone, is hidden, is used for official benchmark testing. And in total, there are about 24,000 prompts. Okay, so I touched on how we do prompt quality assessment. We looked at a variety of metrics and analytics. We considered semantic diversity, realism, external validity, making sure also that we covered all those taxonomy hazards was very important. Now, so we have our prompts. They get fed into the SUTs. They produce a response that then is assessed by the evaluator. And now we have to roll those binary outputs of safe, unsafe, or non-violating, violating of our policy into a grade. What we do is we start with a score, and then we use that score to derive a relative grade. For each system under test, there's an overall grade. But then there's also individual grades for each hazard categories, and this allows people to understand performance at a higher fidelity. The grades are all derived relative to a SUT performance, and Peter touched on this. There's to a reference SUT. Everything's relative to a reference SUT. And this way, are you roughly as good as, better, or worse than that reference SUT? Calculating the grade is actually pretty straightforward. We just look at the total number of responses and the total number of unsafe or violating responses. A score for each SUT is just those violating responses divided by the total of non-violating. It's a straightforward proportion. The relative score is just taking that score divided by the score of the reference SUT, and then you end up with your relative score. This process is the same for if it's the overall grade or if it's the individual hazard grade. It's just a question of what prompts and what responses you look at when you calculate those. For overall grade, it's all responses. For that individual hazard grades, it's just those that fall into that specific hazard category. Then the relative scores are binned, where this is pretty straightforward. You just get a score relative to how you are, right? If you're in with a certain range, you're considered to be performing basically the same as the reference SUT, or you're performing above, or you're performing below. So I'm going to talk now about ground truth. Ground truth is actually pretty important. It feeds into our understanding of the uncertainty of our evaluator, the uncertainty of our final grades, along with it's useful for training our system, the evaluator. The ground truth was derived by sampling responses from large language models and giving them to human evaluators to assess whether or not they believed they were unsafe or safe per our taxonomy and per our guidance produced. The annotation was done by a number of contractors again, suppliers. It went through a similar process for choosing those annotation suppliers as we did for choosing the prompt suppliers. They were given guidance on how to grade the responses, and it was done iteratively. We got feedback on how to, when things weren't clear, we would improve the guidance so that people could do better and have more consistent evaluations. And what they just did is they produced the results of this is violating or non-violating. And both of these things were done, and they helped us understand how to estimate the evaluator error, and were used to feed back into training of the system. All right, there are many sources of system error and uncertainty in our benchmark. There's evaluator error, which we believe is likely the largest source of error currently, but there's other sources like sampling variance or model response variance. Evaluator error, as I said before, was estimated and assessed using the human annotation process. And those human annotators basically provide information if something was a false unsafe or a false safe. And those we could use to feed and understand the uncertainty of our grades. Shona pointed out, and I'd like to reemphasize that we intentionally designed for a conservative evaluator system. We designed the system to have a higher false unsafe rate than a false safe rate. And the big reason for this, well, I'm sure there's many reasons. The reason I like it is that it gives us a reduced likelihood of saying a system is better than it actually is. But what this does do, it does lead to imbalance or a asymmetry in our uncertainty, right? You're more likely to say something is less safe than you're likely to say it is safer than it is. All right. So what happens, these grades, after they've been binned and after our uncertainty has been assessed, are put into a report. We see at the top in the oval here, that is the overall grade. You see the fuzzy lines, the width of our assessment. That is our uncertainty being captured. And then below it, what we see are the various individual grades for individual hazards.